what America was and what it can become. This is Liberty Town Hall.
And thank you for joining us today on Liberty Town Hall. Today we'll be discussing the 17th Amendment and how to get our government back into constitutional compliance kind of mentality. Ken, when we were talking about the structure of our federal government, there was 3 branches to keep everything split up, and the Congress was being one of those branches. But it was really the Congress that's divided into 2 branches of its own, right? On one hand, you have the House of Representatives, and they're there to be elected by the people to represent the people's desires. And then the Senate was there to represent the states. And every state had equal say in it. That's why it didn't count by the population. Every state got 2 senators. And it very clearly said that it was they're to be appointed by the legislators thereof. But the 17th Amendment changed all that, right?
On the color of it, yes.
On the color of it, yes. We're going to talk about how it's enacted here today. What's the fundamental difference there?
How the 17th Amendment was enacted was by decree of William Jennings Bryan, as Secretary of State for Thomas Woodrow Wilson in April of 13.
Oh, my friend Woodrow Wilson. Yes, you
now,
gotta love him.
Article 5 allows for amendments to the Constitution. Article 5 states that if 3/4 of the states agree to the amendment, it becomes force and effect in the Constitution.
Correct.
But there's the last sentence of Article 5, and it reads, "In that no state without its consent shall be deprived of its equal suffrage in the Senate." So how can 3/4 of the states in 1913 deprive me of my unanimous consent to the Senate?
The argument in that says that they didn't deprive you. You still get 2 senators. The only difference is you don't get to say it. The people get to vote.
The state's a polity, which is represented by the state legislature.
Correct.
All right. Now the state legislature.
This is where the states really lost their rights.
They lost their rights.
This is fundamentally when all else fails. This was the end of states' rights.
If you go back to the arguments in the Constitutional Convention of 1787, one of the state's main concerns, the small states, was burden, and the burden was taxation. Direct taxes, which the last one was 1861, are imposed directly upon the states.
Correct.
And you had to get it through. Now, the bill might have started in the House, but it also had to pass the Senate.
Correct.
Now, the state legislature having the owners of paying the bill, which means it'd have to turn around and either take it out of its general fund revenues and/or find a way to create more revenues by going to the people and saying, hey, pony up more of your wealth.
Yep.
The Senate was to be the check of an onerous physical exaction at the federal level.
So the people couldn't just run up a bill and leave it at the states?
Correct.
Right.
So the progressive philosophy required the subordination of states' rights, absolutely required it, because their whole program is socialization, the government being omnipotent and us being serfs to that government, i.e. the capital human resource.
I really don't think you would ever have a spot where over half the states are suing the federal government for an unconstitutional mandate such as the Health Care Act if the states had their voice.
Correct. You wouldn't.
Well, when we return, we're going to talk about the real effect of what happened since the 17th Amendment and how this is all playing out here today. So we'll be right back with more Liberty Town Hall.
Are you a small business reaching out to a national audience or an established company seeking more exposure? Place your ad on Liberty Town Hall and reach up to 46 million homes nationwide. Call now for a quote.
Welcome back to Liberty Town Hall. We're discussing the 17th Amendment and who does your senator really work for? When people started voting for their senator instead of being appointed by the state, didn't they become nothing more than a 6-year representative, just like the House is a 2-year representative?
Yeah, constructively, they turned the Congress from a bifurcated House, upper House and lower House, to a unicameral Congress.
Well, because you had the people being represented in the House of Representatives,
right?
But now, just the same as a representative is elected, the people are able to vote this in, and the states are left holding the bag kind of mentality. They have no voice anymore. So the state really lost its sovereignty at this point.
Yes, it did.
And
well put.
It was a slowly change over time, but now senators really don't perceive themselves representing the state's interest. It's like hiring a lawyer to work for you on your case, but he's really working for somebody else over here. Yes. You have no one representing the states, right? I mean, isn't that the separation in the House and the Senate?
Yeah,
that was supposed to be, right?
They've destroyed the separation of powers constructively under the color of the 17th Amendment, and we suffer the ignominy of that irreparable harm. And the classic example is our state, how our two federal senators are, I'm not going to call them Democrat or Republican, I'm going to call them very progressively orientated senators.
Oh, very liberal, yes.
Very liberal. And what they do is they use our wealth to further their political aspirations. And they cater not for the state's benefit, they cater for their own narcissistic advance.
Yeah, because these things coming out of Washington right now really don't benefit the state in any way. It really dumps more and more back on the state, correct?
It benefits the government. Whether it be a state governmental structure that supports it, which our governmental structure does support an ever-expanding reach of government. I mean, our history since the New Deal has been an overreach of government. A classic example is the 1913 Postal Act, when there were 45 states. And the idea behind the Postal Act was improving roads so the postman could have an easier time delivering rural mail. Well, the Congress held out a carrot, and the carrot was they would fund state improvements if the state would apply for the federal money. Well, that law lasted, I think, 2 years. 3 states out of 45 applied for federal funds. The other 42 states knew better, and that's before the 17th Amendment was imposed under decree of William Jennings Bryan.
They knew that it was a carrot that's going to hook them in and destroy some.
Yeah, and if you read it, they said with federal carrots come federal strings.
Oh, big time.
And they understood it. But with the 17th Amendment, it was 3 election cycles, as you said earlier, 6 years. They elected out all the state-appointed senators, though legacy-wise kept a few of the state-appointed senators' philosophies in place. It took to literally the New Deal, when you had the old generation elected out, you had the unicameral Congress established, where they started passing this massive growth of state and federal government.
That's when it all took place, is at the 17th Amendment. That's why I say Woodrow Wilson is my favorite president. He gave us the Federal Reserve.
Yes.
He took away states' rights.
Yes.
He basically put us on a world stage with World War I was a nightmare, right?
Yes, it was.
Which set us up for World War II big time and created Nazi Germany.
Chapter 2.
Right? Mm-hmm. So how do we fix this?
At the 17th level, we need a state legislature with gumption to stand up.
Because Michigan right now just elected another liberal senator.
Yes.
And yet the state supermajorities for the Republicans, including the governor, would never happen. There's no way Debbie Stabenow would have ever been appointed by this legislator sitting in Lansing.
No, in my humble opinion, the Speaker of the House and the President of the State Senate, who's the Lieutenant Governor, should stand up and appoint a senator and send him down.
You can't, because the 17th Amendment says you can't.
Create a constitutional crisis and send the senator down with papers from the state legislature to sit as the appointed senator in the 113th Congress.
There's no way they're going to do that, because the 17th Amendment would trump that concept.
Well, you have to go to Article 1, where each house is allowed to impose its rules for quantifying the elections. And we know the Senate Majority Leader, Harry Reid, would deny the state's application to send a senator. You're correct.
Right.
But you would create a crisis which could be litigated in the Supreme Court, because it'd be the state against the United States, and you could petition the Supreme Court to review the denial. Now, the Supreme Court, being its history,
it's going to come back and say this.
It's a political question. Yeah, they're going to say it's a political question.
No, they're going to say that the 17th Amendment rules.
That would be the litigative question, because the 17th Amendment was passed by 3/4 of the states.
So what do we do about it? How do we get rid of the 17th Amendment?
We need a state legislature to start sending down senators. Literally.
So
you need the states to reclaim their standing in the federal Senate. You need the state political class. We need principled people. Your solution is not in D.C. at all. Your solution's in Lansing and the other 49 state capitals. We need principled legislatures to stand up and reclaim the federal Senate from the progressives' usurpation with the 17th Amendment. The 17th Amendment is a colorful amendment.
Well, we have a problem getting that done because the very heavy city metro areas, for example, Michigan, the whole state voted against Debbie Stabenow. All of a sudden, 2 counties voted, and she's up by 1 million points.
She won 1 million points, and the majority of her million came out of Wayne, Oakland, and Macomb.
Yep.
I always mispronounce
Well, it was 2 that really flipped it big time.
But she even lost in my county of Ionia. Pardon me, Pete Hoekstra lost by 2,000 votes in Ionia County.
Right. And
that's supposed to be a conservative county. So it's more indicative than just the massive vote she got out of the 3 unionized counties. It also has to do with our knowledge of political history in this country, and we don't have it anymore.
We'll be right back as we discuss the 17th Amendment and what the solution is. We're going to have to dig into this. We'll be right back. Hello, my name is Glenn Wilson, host of Liberty Town Hall. I'm reaching out to all the members of the Tea Party all across the country. We are faced with a liberal media that just will not talk about the issues that are facing America today with any honest or straightforward candidness to it. The show has been built for you, the Tea Party people, to have a voice in the media. We cover over 230 stations across the country, prime time, both coasts. I'm asking you to call us for your material that you want to talk about, but also I'm asking you for your help. We need sponsors of the show in order to keep this airwave network going. Please call us, support the show. I'm asking for your help. May God bless you, and may God bless America. Thanks. And welcome back to Liberty Town Hall. We're discussing the 17th Amendment and how to solve the problem of the states losing their sovereignty in this country. Ken, if we need our governors and our legislators in the states to stand up and send somebody in violation of the 17th Amendment, they're never going to do that. So we have to find a way to fire them.
Yeah, we have to turn over our state polity. We have to put people in public office in the state legislature who understand the Constitution is a document of limitations, not a document of color.
Okay, so what? People should just go knocking on every door saying 17th Amendment's got to go? Should we start a nationwide campaign that the 17th Amendment's got to go? How do we really...
worked with the Tea Party originally.
Yeah, but nobody cares about anything until it affects them.
Correct.
Now the health care bill is, to me, the ultimate example of the states have no rights, no say. They're getting hit with bills.
Yes.
One way or another, the states are paying these bills. How do we get the 17th Amendment out of here? We can't do it by asking the governors.
No,
we know they won't do it.
We have to educate our polity, you and I. We have to share with our neighbors that if we have a responsibility to stand up, we can no longer suffer the insufferable. I mean, this goes back to...
The liberals took a hold of our schools and our youth.
Yes, they have.
And they have raised, basically through the school system, a group of liberals that are just all about what the government can give them, what they can keep getting, correct? So how do we narrow that down without the timeline of doing it? I mean, they've had decades to do this, and now we're feeling the results of it in every aspect of our life. We don't have decades to change this. The system's not going to last that long.
Well, you look at the voting age population. There are approximately 250 million voting age population. Only 180 million people voted in the last election. Out of that, they split basically evenly, 49 to 51. So we have an untapped voting block out there that if we could motivate them, we could change the state polity.
Well, the Tea Parties are working hard at this.
Yes.
But they don't have the resources to fight the big Democrat and Republican machinery.
Don't have to fight it. It's your neighborhood. It starts in literally in Michigan, it starts in your township.
That's what I want.
You motivate your township.
So it does make a difference if I go next door and have faith that somebody else is going to go to their next door neighbor, right?
Yeah. Marketing shows if I talked to one person today about let's overturn the 17th Amendment and let's do it constructively within the limitations of our polity. 1,000 people know about the conversation in 30 days. Whether they agree with it or not, I'm not concerned, but 1,000 people will know. That's the marketing algorithm. That's the algebraic equation.
So the idea is just talk to everybody you can.
Right.
Because I do that. I do. I stopped at a gas station the other day and I was debating with somebody about the Federal Reserve and how the Federal Reserve is literally collecting interest on money they never had. Banks
money
literally,
for nothing, chicks for free?
isn't
Put
that,
me on MTV?
it must be, money for nothing, because they're collecting money for nothing.
Yes.
And this person thought that was okay. He really did believe that that's just the way it is in America. And,
yes.
The government is always picked winners and losers. The government's always doing these things. And that's just what it means to be in America. Now, that was one man actually standing up and saying, hey, this is America. If you don't like it, leave. Well, so there's that attitude out there.
Yes, there is.
There's more people now collecting from the government than paying into the government.
I believe we're about above the break-even point, yes.
Well, you're talking about the working class break-even point, right?
Yes.
But what about all the retired? They're getting Social Security. They're getting stuff. They're not producing wealth.
Yeah, they're
so at that point we were well over 55%.
Yeah, well, you have the math works out. There's approximately 350 million people in our country. There were 110 million, 120 million people who will file on a 1040, an individual 1040. I don't know the statistic for corporate filings on 1120. But you have approximately 55 million people working for county, state, local, and federal services. You have another approximately 55 million people wrapped into what's known as Social Security.
All these government jobs, those are taxpayer liability jobs.
Those are tax liability
They're not a job.
jobs.
That's what's even worse.
Yeah, and they're dependent upon increasing the dependency of the other 55 million people. So you have
those are liabilities to the taxpayer. Those paychecks. I mean, I'm not saying that people don't work, but I'm just saying their paycheck is a liability to the taxpayer.
Yeah,
period.
it's taken out of our general wealth.
So when you get all said and done, you got about 30% of the people producing the wealth, and 70% of the people either living off of it by working at the government or living off it by retirement or disability.
We live under 112 years, starting from the accidental presidency of Theodore Roosevelt in September of '01. Where we have tolerated a progressive ideology of socialism. And that's what the progressives have always been. And these gentlemen were
so
educated.
When we talk about progressives, we mean Marxism, socialism, moving it, progressively moving it that way,
yes,
correct? Yes,
that's right. And they used the word progressive to cover what they really were, Marxists and socialists.
Right.
And you scratch a socialist, you're going to find the communist. And the communist is the supreme, omnipotent state.
So basically, you have the people that are taking from the system and the people that don't want to give to the system no more. It's a welfare-minded society we got. So how do we change and get people to care about the 17th Amendment if they only care about what they can get from the government anyway? And it's better for them to elect a senator than to have a state stand up as individual rights. It's like you're telling the people, give up your voice and give it to the state so the state have its sovereignty back. How are we going to convince them of that?
It might take an absolute crisis, where this tyrannical system that
so we can't just vote people out of this then.
Ideally, we want to, and again, it requires us to start in our own backyards. You have to start in your township. That's the roots of it.
When we return after these messages, we'll talk about the 6-year solution, and we'll be right back.
Are you a small business reaching out to a national audience or an established company seeking more exposure? Place your ad on Liberty Town Hall and reach up to 46 million homes nationwide. Call now for a quote.
Welcome back to Liberty Town Hall. We're discussing how to restore the balance of power in our government at the Congress level between the House and the Senate. And you say, in order to control Washington way up there, we have to take over our township. Yes?
We have to influence the way our township operates.
Restore our township
restore
And that's going to
township.
restore Washington?
No, it'll restore the state. You need to restore the state. The solution is in our state capitals. Our constitutional republic was predicated upon sovereignty of states in a confederation.
But every state has a metro belt or band that is just controlled by the progressives. What is any remote county going to do against that machine?
You've got to shut down what supports the machine, and it's our wealth that supports the machine. I mean, the epitome
Well, they're
of
going to
models.
raise it. They're going to raise taxes right here. They're talking about this physical cliff that's going off. So the money, they got the money. They're going to raise the taxes. That's all there is to it.
We're suffering a political theater for in the local elections for the federal House. Elections are local for the federal House, and Boehner was elected out of Ohio he has, for some reason, convinced everybody in his federal district back in Ohio that he's just a good guy trying to do the best he can. Yet here he's going to stand on the political stage with, like Grassley out of Georgia, and say, hey, we need to raise taxes, otherwise we're going to go over a physical cliff. And it's a cliff they've created over generations.
Make the jump now for me from paying attention to who's on my township board. And Washington. I mean, if I focus down here at the township, how does that help me in Washington?
Because it comes down to property rights. And they're using the politicity at the township level, at the county level, and at the state level.
So you think if the township actually stands up, it can actually hold a case against the state and the feds?
Yes, it can hold the state. The township can denude the exactions imposed by state law, because the township is an instrumentality of the state legislature.
How does that get me to the feds?
Because in order for the feds to thrive, they need to come into the state and have the state enact commingling laws to impose their Obamacare, to impose
So if we get
taxes.
our townships to stand up to the states would have no choice but to either stand up to the Fed,
or we elect them out. It's your 6-year solution. We need to start electing
I say
out.
a 6-year solution. Forget the local level. Let's deal with just the House, the Senate, and the President. 6 years, we can get it done and be done.
It won't do you any good if you elect out the top and leave the bottom rot.
Yes, but if we start firing some of these guys at the top of the food chain, the other guys might take the hint that, hey, wait a minute, they're not taking it no more.
Well, our history is that you have to start at the root of the problem. And the root is our township. The township supports the state.
Township, county, state. You got parishes and stuff in different states. They're named differently, but basically it's the unit of government going down from the state.
Massachusetts is trying to regionalize the whole state. They've tried to literally defranchise local politicity. And once you disfranchise local politicity, you create anonymity. And you go back to Thomas Woodrow Wilson and the progressives in the primary. They took the local community out by primaries and anonymous election. Vote for me because I've got the best ads. And this is how people work. The 30-second ad does work.
Well, when we have to finish up today, this is a tough one. But bottom line, if we pay attention locally and what goes on with our local government, it will affect up the food chain.
Yes.
That's really what we have to do. If we want a smaller federal government, then let's really pay attention to our local government so that they can stand up to the feds. Yes?
Yes.
Is that the way it works? Mm-hmm. Well, that's all the time we have today. Please join us next time here on Liberty Town Hall.
If men through fear, fraud, or mistake should in terms renounce and give up any essential natural right, the eternal law of reason and the great end of society would absolutely vacate such renunciation, the right of freedom being the gift of God Almighty. It is not in the power of man to alienate this gift and voluntarily become a slave. Rights of the Colonists by John Adams, 1772.